Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brought to the Table, where I bring a unique game that I love and am very passionate about to your folks' table today. And today, this is kind of one of those love letter ones because this game I more enjoy from very much like a design standpoint, a package standpoint, a game that really kind of offers a lot of content and a lot of variety to it. And honestly, it's just a game that just feels really good, which is Wingspan, which is from Stonemaier Games and is designed by Elizabeth Hargrave. I hope I pronounced your name right. I apologize if I do. I have a thing of screwing up people's names. But Wingspan came out in 2019 here. And as probably a lot of you have probably heard about this game from a multitude of content creators, or at least seen it at your local game store shelf, Wingspan is essentially an engine building set collection bird game. Now, when you first hear that, you're probably like, what in the absolute hell are we talking about here? This is birds. Who's into birds? Trust me, when I showed this game to my father, he asked me the same question. But the thing is, when you play Wingspan, regardless of if you're a fan of the theme of your feathered friends right here, you're going to realize that this game actually has a lot more to it than just the theme itself. It's very mechanically sound, and it just feels good to play. So, without further ado, I'm going to go talk about this game now, because there's a lot over here sitting at my table. So, let's go ahead and jump to the second screen, and I'm going to give you a quick overview and kind of my thoughts and feelings of Wingspan and why I enjoy it so much. So, let's fly. Let's fly to the other table. I tried to make a pun. It sucked. Just deal with it, people. All right, let's go over here. Let's go. Alright, so here we are. Here's Wingspan. I have a lot of stuff set up. I have it set up right now currently, so there's only like technically one player's board. But if you are going to be playing this with multiple people, you're definitely going to be having a lot more, boards and stuff laid out. And there's a lot going on here. So just stick with me as I kind of go over some of the general gameplay rules. I won't be going over every single detailed rule because there's tons of videos out there on how to play the game, but I want to give you a general idea of how this game works and plays so you kind of get a gist of what I'm going to be talking about when I'm just going to be gushing all over this game. So the main gimmick of Wingspan is that the game takes up a place over a series of rounds, and you essentially take actions, as your turn, on your turn, and you get a set limited amount of those each round. Each player does that. Then once the round ends, there's going to be some round cleanup, and then you proceed to the next round of the game. You're essentially just trying to score the most victory points, nothing too crazy along those lines. And essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to build up, essentially, your board right here filled with birds. So how you do that, essentially, is that you're going to have some bird cards that you're going to be drawing, you're going to be having some food tokens that you're going to be acquiring, and you're going to be having some eggs that you're going to be laying in order to not only score points, but also get more birds out on your table. So, on your turn, what can you do? Well, essentially what you can do is that there are 3 traditional actions as well as playing a bird into your board right here. So, the gain food action right here allows you to gain food from the bird feeder. Now, the bird feeder is unique because what's going to happen is that you're going to actually roll these 5 wooden die, and then that's going to be basically the start of the game resources that exist out on the table. Now, with that, you're then allowed to basically take that many amount of resources based off your current starting gain food ability right here, which we'll get into. So right here, let's say I want to gain a fish. Well then, guess what? I can gain a fish token, and then there you go. Now, there's typically actually a bird feeder in this game that you can essentially act like a dice tower, so you can kind of separate what's been spent. But I personally don't like dice towers that much, so I kind of play with like the used and the pool of resources right here. So a player gains the fish token, and that's what you can do. Then, one of the other actions you can do is lay eggs. If you actually have an active bird in your board, we'll pretend that this raven exists, you can actually lay eggs onto that bird based off the lay eggs action that you take. Now, it's important to note that in this case, I can lay 2 eggs with that particular action right there. I can only lay up to basically the 2 eggs and have that many eggs on a single bird based off of their egg count, which is located on the card. In this case, the raven is 3. Now the last action is that you can take a bird card from the global supply right here, or the top card of the bird deck. So you can just take one of these cards, add it to your hand, or you can just take a random one from the top. Why you would do that? There's a bunch of reasons. We'll get into that as we talk about this game. Now, the last action, and probably the most important action, is basically playing your bird card. Now, you'll have some bird cards in your hand right here that you'll actually start with some bird cards at the beginning of the game. I won't go over how the introductory and how that's all set up, because there's a lot of steps to that. But essentially, each bird card right here is going to have a resource value attached to it. So in this case right here, if we look at this card, this one right here has a worm and a wheat. So if I had a worm and a wheat token in my supply, we'll pretend that I do, I spend those tokens, and then I get to place this bird into that portion of the habitat on that icon. So in this case right here with the green, with the trees, I can then play the bird in the leftmost space of my track right here. Now, why is playing birds important? Well, number one, you're going to gain victory points based off this number next to the feather on the card. That will score towards you at the end of the game. Now, on top of that too, as you play more birds into each section of the habitat, you're going to actually be able to gain a stronger action of that type. So for example, by default, I'm only allowed to gain 1 food resource when I take the gain food action. But now with the bird here, I can now gain a resource, but if I actually sacrifice a card, I can gain an additional resource as well. And you gotta think about, if I play this bird right here, let's just pretend I already spent the resources and did all that stuff, I now can just gain 2 resources without having to sacrifice anything. And that's going to upgrade as you go about to literally a maximum right here. You could possibly gain 4 different food resources. That goes for the same for each one of these, for the eggs, laying the eggs. So I can lay an additional egg with, if I spend any resource, 3, 4, possibly 5 if I spend 1. And I can actually draw a bunch of additional cards to really get my hand going. So there you go. That's what you're going to be doing there. Now, playing the birds isn't just as easy as spending the resources. You'll notice on the board there's this egg icon at the top of each column. Now what that means essentially is that if you want to play a bird there, you'll have to spend an active egg that's on one of your birds. So kind of the way that this goes is that in order to lay an egg, you need to actually have a bird in play. So let's pretend that we have this bird out where you laid some eggs on it and all that stuff. Now if I have the resources, I can play this bird, here, spend 1 egg, and then I can start stacking up. So there are some steps that you have to take. You got to first gain the resources. Then if you don't have the birds, gain the birds. Lay the eggs. Then play the birds. So there is a step-by-step process that you actually have to, go through in order to acquire your birds and start being able to upgrade your actions. Now one more thing that's interesting about playing your birds in those habitats, let's pretend that I played these 2 here because they both have the ability to be played in the grasslands area right here. So when you take an action, so this gain food action right here, part of what makes this an engine building game is the fact that you're trying to basically build a more efficient system for yourself as you're taking your actions on your turn. So certain birds are going to have when activated abilities. Now what does that mean? Well, when I take the gain food action, so I'm going to gain this food, then I can choose in order basically which of these birds activate actions I want to activate if I want to at all. So this one says, if this bird is to the right of all other birds in this habitat, move it to another habitat. So what I can do is I can actually move this bird to a different habitat, allowing me to essentially automatically upgrade for free that particular habitat, which is pretty dope. So let's say, for example, I'm just going to take some cards from here and just kind of lay them out. Let's say if I did something like this, let's say if the board was set up more like this. When I activate this bird right here, I can move the bird right here, and I can immediately upgrade, my draw bird cards action. Or I can upgrade my lay eggs action, basically for free almost. But I have to take the gain food action in order to activate that. This one right here says I can tuck a card from my hand behind this bird. What tucking means is that if I have cards in my hand, I can essentially tuck the card underneath the bird like this. And what that's going to do is that at the end of the game, for every tucked card that's underneath a bird, I score an additional point. So that's important. And on top of that, this one says, if you do, I can gain a worm or a wheat from the supply. So I can instantly just gain extra resources that I can use to start, playing other birds. Now, not every bird's going to have that. As you can see, some of these birds right here that I just kind of laid out don't have those abilities. Some of them right here, like this one, this dove right here, when it's played, I get to lay an egg on each one of my birds that have that particular nest type. So that circle icon right there is a nest type. So I can lay eggs on those particular birds of that type. So that's cool. There are other types of abilities as well. Let me see if I can find one. Here we go. This one right here with the pink, and it'll say once between turns, basically allows you to activate this ability in between player turns. So it says when another player takes the gain food action, if they gain any number of rat resources, you also gain a rat resource from the supply. So that's one type of resource as well. There are other types as well. Those are kind of the core ones. Let me see if I can find another one just to talk about it here. I don't think I'm going to draw any. Let's see. Oh, here we go. This is actually a good one. So sometimes you're going to have these little death icons right here. And essentially, sometimes certain abilities will activate when other birds essentially eat on other birds as well. So there's kind of this nice thing of like, if a player is going to have a bunch of these icons, you can benefit off of when they actually take their activate actions, which is interesting. In the Wingspan expansions, there are other different types of these, special abilities that the birds can have. I won't cover them here, but these are kind of the core ones that come with the base game. Now, what's also interesting about this too is that all these birds that you've seen right now that I've shown off in this video, they're all different. That is because every single bird card in Wingspan, including the expansions, is different. So what's going to make this game unique every time that you play it is that the cards that you're going to have in your hand, your opponents are going to have in their hand, what's going to be actively available, as well as in the deck, it's going to be random every time, and your strategy is going to have to change because you're not going to be able to basically like, I'm going to get all the raven birds, or I'm going to get all the finches. No, it doesn't work like that. All these cards are different. So you have to work like that. So there you go. One thing to note, every time you take an action, you're going to place one of these cubes on the particular action, and then essentially once you're out of cubes, that's when the round ends. You'll end up placing your cube on this round marker over here. Now what's also cool is that essentially each round's going to have an additional scoring method based off of whatever the condition on these randomized tiles that are also double-sided are. So in this case right here, the player with the most sets of eggs in each one of their habitats is going to score the most points. So you'll end up putting your token on there. And then what's going to happen is on the next round, you're going to have one less token to use. So the rounds are going to go by a little faster every time. Once you're done with round 4, that's when the final end game scoring occurs. And then the player with the most victory points is the winner. Now, one of the first things I want to talk about when it comes to this game is that I have a lot of thoughts and feelings and stuff about this game. There is a lot of incredible systems in this game, but I think the core thing I want to talk about is that, when you probably first heard of Wingspan, especially if you are in the hobby space, you've definitely heard of this game. And you probably heard about how it sold off of all the store shelves, and it essentially was a lot of folks' game of the year for 2019 when it first came out. It's incredibly good. Now, why is it that good? You're probably wondering, all right, this game about birds, playing them in habitats and all that stuff, why is this game so good? Now, full disclosure, I love animals. I love dogs. That's my favorite animal. I would love a dog version of Wingspan. But I have no real attachment to birds. Put it that way. But the thing is that this game just feels good to play. There's something about in tabletop gaming when something just feels satisfying to do. And when something is satisfying to do, even if you're losing, you're going to have a fun time because whatever you're doing is actually satisfying for the player in this weird psychology, we can go down that rabbit hole kind of method. And that's what really makes Wingspan so much fun. It's very relaxing. It's fun to play. Everything that you do feels satisfying to do, even if it's not making a whole lot of progress towards your goal. So like just playing cards down obviously feels satisfying, and watching your board just build up as you're playing out these cards and building the engine and like starting to see things when you're activating and get these different activation icons as you go down. You know, gaining the eggs, taking these eggs right here, and then you get to lay them on the different birds. And something I didn't mention is that for every egg that's left over at the end of the game on your birds, you actually score additional victory points per egg. So that's a way that you can score a lot of points as well. That feels good. Taking resources from the supply feels really good. I think what helps with this is the fact that the tokens, while these were punched out, they feel really good. They're very thick cardboard. Like literally right there, you can see how thick those suckers are. And they have really pretty art on them as well. Also, the artwork in this game is absolutely fantastic, and the graphic design on it. All these birds are illustrated by a multitude of different artists. They look really nice on the table. The graphic design on the card specifically as well look really solid. I'm a very big fan of good graphic design, and this game definitely has nailed it. It's very clean. It's very simple. It's even got some interesting facts about the bird at the bottom. So it actually shows like what region they're from. It said this one for the bald eagle says bald eagles steal fish. Ben Franklin thought this was a bad choice for the U.S. national bird. So little fun facts about each of the birds. So you're actually kind of learning something, which as an instructor I find very nice that when a game is actually teaching you something outside of the gameplay itself. But it doesn't also just like obviously the fun fact, but also like the type of habitat that those birds are going to be around. All eagles definitely are going to be more in the water region area because they eat lots of fish. So that's where they're going to, reside a lot. So there's definitely everything right here. It feels good to do. And even one of the things I didn't talk about is the victory point cards. You actually start with it by minimum 2 of these at the beginning of the game. And you get to score additional points based off of if you get certain birds with certain types. So right here, this one says birds with that eating power. You gain additional 2 victory points per bird. Birds that only eat worms. So if the resource cost, for example, right here, the swift right here only eats the worms, I'm going to be able to score victory points for people that only eat the worms. So this game, just has lots of really satisfying things to do. And even if you're not going towards those victory point condition cards, you're still going to have a good time. Everything in this game just feels good to do. And you don't get a lot of games that feel good to play even when you're losing. There are games that, especially momentum-driven games where, you're just getting very swingy turns or very swingy luck, or you're getting a lot of stuff. That's usually when the feel-goodness is coming into play, when you're really stringing those combos together. Here in this game, just because of the nature of it being a straightforward engine-building game and how it's kind of designed up front, where essentially, at the beginning, you're going to be gaining a little, but then you're gradually going to be gaining more, and the game kind of is built around you being able to gain resources and being able to play the birds and lay the eggs and all that stuff. And since everything is different, one of the things I will say from playing a lot of deck building games is that usually in a deck building game there's some type of strategy of, I want the cards that are going to allow me to draw more cards, so I should probably buy lots of cards that synergize to allow me to do that. Since Wingspan, every single card in here is different, you can't really build a strategy off of, alright, I need to specifically get all these cards in order to reach my victory point conditions and stuff. Sometimes you're not going to even worry about those at all. Sometimes you might end up ignoring those completely and just build an army of eggs. Or if you get a bird that allows you to tuck cards underneath it, you're going to be drawing a bunch of cards and then activating so you can tuck a bunch underneath that particular card. Heck, you might be actually trying to go after the fact that, hey, if I just have the most of this particular thing, for example, this round 2 marker right here says in the personal supply, if I just have the most resource tokens, I gained 5 victory points for the round right there, which is crazy. This game is just super satisfying to play. And the thing, too, is that there's lots of variety with this. Like I said, every single bird card is different. I didn't even talk about the fact that, and I'm not even showing all of them here, all these round tokens are randomized. and then on top of that, you can flip them around, so they'll actually have different goals at the on them as well. In the expansions, they actually come with more of these as well that you could do. And even on top of that, this particular one right here is for a more competitive layout for the round conditions. You can actually flip this over here, and now you actually have it in a less competitive style, where essentially you'll just be able to gain points based off of the, basically that condition. So if you got the, for each one in the supply, you'll basically just gain a point, stuff like that. So it'll be less competitive, and you can actually build more rather than you're trying to compete to actually have the most between other players. So there's tons of options here in Wingspan. I didn't even mention the fact that the game actually has a built-in single-player mode where you can actually play against an autonomous opponent. I have not personally done that. I am lucky enough that I actually own the digital version of Wingspan, so I can get my fix that way. But it's got options. This game's got incredible production value. It's got all sorts of ways just to ease the players in. On top of that, too, I didn't even mention this. The game actually comes with basically cards that allow you to simulate basically your first ever time playing Wingspan. So if you just want 3 basic cards up front and also like how that experience should feel, it walks you through some turns. I love it when games do that, where they actually like have this kind of like tutorial system built into the game, where if you're really just trying to learn it like from the raw, you haven't watched the video, you haven't read the rule book a whole lot, it gives you kind of a good way to basically set up what your first game experience should be. And then you can just add those cards into the giant deck. What's funny is I'm showing you basically, this is the bird stack right here. That's not even including this portion of the deck, as well as this deck, which is basically including one of the expansions, which is that this is when you're going to start seeing the more unique stuff. Like this one is round end birds, which is one of the unique things that added into the European expansion. But yeah, so all sorts of stuff. And there's also the new Oceania, how you're supposed to pronounce it. Words suck for me. You all know this. Which is super cool because it adds in basically a new resource type called Nectar, which essentially acts as basically a random resource token that you can use, and also applies for end round scoring or end game scoring, as well as these resources actually go away at the end of the round, so they're wild. So you got to burn these to go play some more birds. And the expansion also comes with a new board that you can use that actually helps out with the fact that there's this new resource type. And you'll actually notice that some of the resource generation stuff, or some of the different things like gaining the food, gaining the eggs, drawing the cards, is actually a completely different layout. So I believe that was done for balancing purposes, because I think they saw that a lot of folks were gaining a lot of points from just getting eggs. So they were trying to balance that out a little bit. But super cool. I'm actually looking forward to playing that particular expansion. I have not had the chance to yet. But I have played the original a bunch of times, and I'm absolutely in love with this game. I think it's very accessible. I think it's super great. It's a very pretty game, and I think even if you're not a fan of the theme, you're still going to get a kick out of this game. This game is a very relaxing game. I've played a decent chunk of the digital version now. It's definitely a game where you can just kind of sit back and just play it, and regardless if you're winning or losing, it just feels good to play. And it feels even better when you're synergizing what's on your board and stuff, which obviously, is definitely what you want. But even when you're losing and you're not getting a lot of points, just building up your board of stuff as much as you can, even if it's not a whole lot, still feels good to do. And I can't recommend this game enough if you get the chance to play it or have the group members to want to play it in your gaming group. Wingspan, absolutely fantastic. It's a great game. Absolutely love it. I don't know much if I could say any more. What about you, Taco? Taco, you got anything to say? No? All right. I was going to say Taco's going to probably try to eat the birds. So, there you go. That's Wingspan. It's great. So there you go. That's just me gushing all over Wingspan. It's absolutely fantastic game. I actually own everything for Wingspan that currently exists right now. So both the European and the new Oceania, whatever that. I can't say words, people. You folks know how bad I suck at words. But absolutely fantastic game. I absolutely adore playing this. So what is it? Who is this game for? What audience are we looking for at this? So Wingspan plays up to, I believe, 6 players. Hold on, I think it's 6. Yes, Wingspan plays up to 6. The base game itself will only play up to 5, but with at least the European expansion, it offers enough resources and stuff to play 6, I believe. I could be wrong though, so someone can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But with the players with this game, I found it mixed between the people I've played with in my real life gaming group as well as people who are in the tabletop gaming space, who likes this game, who maybe won't be as into this game. Because the thing with Wingspan is, like I said, it is definitely a very bird centric game. It is very much a thematic towards learning more about birds and the habitats that they inhabit. Words are hard. Food that they eat, where they come from, stuff like that. Very thematic in terms of all that stuff when it comes to them. And if you're not into that, you might not be able to get into this game as much. Perfect example is I tried to introduce this game to my dad, and the whole concept of birds just doesn't jive with him. He gets the mechanics, he understands why the mechanical side is good, but since the theme is not really up his alley at all, he is a dog person through and through. He has no care for birds. So let's just say he had some special words to say about this game. And I've also introduced to some other people that just weren't super into it because they mainly said that the theme itself with the birds just wasn't jiving with them, which I get. I personally kind of did not get into this game at first because it was birds. I wasn't interested into it. But I actually got the chance to play it because some friends were playing it on TTS, and I was super into it enough where I was like, I want to buy this game now. So I went ahead and bought the game earlier this year, and I absolutely enjoyed it. I played with some other friends too, who are super into Magic the Gathering. And let me tell you, whenever I hear someone say, cast my bird card, it is the most hilarious thing in the world. But they definitely saw, like, kind of the thing is that when you get into the more strategical side of Wingspan, there's definitely, like, trying to build out your engine enough where things are going to start, working, effects are really going to trigger, things like that. And when it comes to the hardcore tabletop gamer that's really into games regardless of theme, definitely going to love this game. So if you have a group of tabletop folks that really just dig any type of game in general, especially engine building games, because this game, remove the theme entirely, is probably will be the best engine building game that's ever going to exist, period. I don't think there's going to be a game that's going to top this. Especially just looking at the newest expansion, it seems like they balanced a lot of stuff. One of the biggest critiques I know from just talking with people who like this game is that the eggs concept of scoring a ton of points from eggs is a little overpowered, and the new board specifically counteract that with some of the new abilities, or actually restricting the amount of eggs that people can lay and actually improving how many resources and cards that you can draw. So, and then plus the nectar tokens add a whole extra like incentive of gaining that resource as well as using that resource to score extra points, play more bird cards, fill up your board quicker. So lots of cool stuff. They definitely understand kind of like what makes Wingspan good. And with those mechanics, they're not adding anything super crazy. And what's cool too is that they actually designed that particular expansion so anything that has to do with nectar can play with the old board and just use nectar as just a wild resource. So it's pretty dope. I think what they've done with this game is absolutely fantastic. So in general, I think this game is definitely more towards a tabletop gamer rather than someone that you're trying to get into the hobby. It does have some really good ways to get folks that are newer to tabletop games into the hobby with that tutorial mode and stuff. And it's got that cool single player thing. So if you just want to experience from like a solo mode, it's great. But definitely what I've had most success in introducing this from to players is folks that are into the hobby already are going to really dig this game regardless of the theme. If you're trying to get someone new into the hobby, if they aren't already into birds, I don't necessarily think it's going to be probably the best way to get them in. But the game overall, some of the most satisfying,
well-designed game mechanics that you'll probably ever see in a tabletop game, probably in the next decade. I stand by that opinion. If it weren't for Disney Villainous taking over my life in 2019, and if I played this earlier, this game definitely is the game of the year for 2019, hands down. I wish I would have been able to play it sooner so I could have been able to say that, but just from a design standpoint, this game is absolutely fantastic. So, that's Wingspan. It seems to be more readily available now. It used to not be. You can get it at the Stonemeyer website, as well as I'm pretty sure you can go ahead and buy the core box of it on Amazon. It is a little bit of a pricier game. It runs for about $50 to $60, and the expansions run for about $25, $30. So depending on where you get them, it is a little pricier game, but the production makes up for that. Cards are really good card stock. They're actually matted. So not like super thick matting either. So very well quality cards. All the components are top notch quality. The dice are wooden. All the punch out tokens for the resources are very thick cardboard, and all the eggs are like this nice little plastic, which I really dig. So really well put together game. So the price that you're paying for this game, absolutely worth every penny. It's definitely a great game to keep on your shelf. So that's it for me. I'm now going to go reorganize my entire Wingspan collection because I'm trying to keep it all in one box. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this shows you how good, if not how much I enjoy Wingspan. And until then, I'll see you folks on the next episode when I show off another game that I'm passionate about. I wonder what that one's going to be. I wonder. I don't know yet. I'll have to decide. I have some games I want to show off. So until then, everybody, I'll see you folks on the next episode.